member of the Family of Abraham Organizing Committee for tonight's event. Tonight's program features a presentation by Ralph Schultz, President and CEO of the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce, with responses from Farshid Firdousi, President and Chief Executive Officer of Innova Payroll, Darrell Freeman, Founder and Executive Chairman of Zycron Incorporated, and Hannah Paramore, President of Paramore, the digital agency. There will be an opportunity for questions after we hear from Mr. Schultz and our panelists. But before we begin, I'd like to thank the Cathedral of the Incarnation for hosting tonight's event. And I'd like to recognize Father Ed Steiner, who's with us tonight, Monsignor Owen Campney, who's with us tonight. And I'd also like to thank Bob Teague for that wonderful music that invited us to today. So before we actually get started, a few housekeeping. First, if you'll reach into your pocket and find your cell phone, and please put it on mute or turn it off. Secondly, if you have any questions for our panelists or our speaker after they've completed talking, you will find on your chair a 3x5 card. If you will please, at the time during the evening, just raise your hand. A member of our organizing committee will pick up the card and they'll get it to me, and then we will ask questions from the podium. So let's talk a little bit about why we're here tonight. The Family of Abraham is an interfaith group that believes that differences among us based on our respective faith traditions are best addressed by increasing our knowledge of each other and engaging in personal interaction. Towards that end, the Family of Abraham has sponsored and or supported programs over the last 3 years which have addressed questions about our Muslim neighbors and interfaith relations. Our program tonight, however, offers a somewhat different perspective on the importance of diversity. Tonight, we turn our attention to our greater community and economic life and well-being of Nashville. Our greater Nashville community benefits, as you will hear from our speaker and panelists, from maximizing opportunities for social and economic advancement for all. A diverse community presents many challenges, but also offers different opportunities. In other words, welcoming those who may be different is not only the right thing to do, but it's also good business. This evening's speaker is Ralph Schultz. Mr. Schultz is President and Chief Executive Officer of the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce is an organization whose membership includes over 2,000 businesses located in Davidson and the surrounding counties, dedicated to facilitating community leadership to create economic prosperity. Also with us tonight to respond to Mr. Schultz's remarks and offer their own observations are Farshid Firdousi, President and Chief Executive Officer of Innova Payroll, Darrell Freeman, Founder and Executive Chairman of Zycron Inc., and Hannah Paramore, President of Paramore, the digital agency. So, now on to our speaker. We are pleased to have with us tonight Ralph Schultz, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Schultz is a passionate public servant with a history of leadership in education, tourism, and economic prosperity. Under his leadership, the Chamber of Commerce has awarded the American Chamber of Commerce Executives Chamber of the Year Award, due in large part to its leadership in the campaign that worked to defeat the English-only charter event a few years ago. Please join me in welcoming Ralph Schultz.
Well, with that applause, I think that concludes my remarks. Let me say, first of all, Darrell Freeman, who's sitting up here, was chairman of the chamber, and a big part of English only being such an important part of our agenda. And Tom Negri has made what's now at least legend in the chamber, a 7 p.m. phone call 2 days after I got to the chamber to say that the English only issue was an important issue for the chamber to take on economically. Also would like to acknowledge in the room Ed Steiner, we're contemporaries from the past in high school, and Father Joe Pat Green was one of my instructors in high school, and Father Campion also, Monsignor Campion at Notre Dame High School. So this is a very intimidating audience from perspective. I have much more to say than I will have time to say it. So there are a few specific comments tonight that I will focus on, and I think you're going to hear some rich commentary from the people that are seated up here with me. First of all, I will tell you that cultural diversity and cultural diversity are an absolute necessity to creating prosperity. Where there may have been a choice, where there may have been an option somewhere in the past, there is no option, because the marketplace, the participants in the marketplace, the global marketplace, the upcoming generations, they are more and more embracing diversity and cultural diversity without even really acknowledging that it takes effort, that there is any special effort required. Whether it's the growth of travel, or it's the advent of the internet, expression and relationship building and contact with people who have different backgrounds, different heritages, and different ethnicities, different race, etc. More and more of that contact is occurring on a natural basis. So the communities of the globe that are prospering and moving forward are communities globally that are embracing that diversity. A couple of years ago, we took a trip with 100 community leaders to Toronto. And one of the things we noted about Toronto, and we had selected it as one of the best practice regional prosperity growth communities on this continent, was that in Toronto, over 50% of the population did not originate there. In fact, over 50% of their population was an immigrant population. What was so interesting to those of us that were on the trip was that they didn't even acknowledge that as an issue or a project or a measure. It was a natural course of their community that there were different people of different types, different kinds, different backgrounds that just blended together in their community naturally. It just wasn't even a special effort. So among the things I would tell you right now is that if a community is to be prosperous, it will have to be culturally diverse. Second thing about that from a marketplace perspective is that these younger generations, particularly the 18 to 35 demographic that's rising at this point in time, are actually seeking communities that possess cultural diversity as a feature of the lifestyle in that area. Now that's important to us for this reason, and I say this from a chamber perspective. There's real economic impact here. When I entered the workforce in 1974, I graduated from college and I found a job and I moved to where that job was. That's not the way economic development goes anymore. It used to be that you built the community by attracting jobs. That's not the way it works anymore. You now build prosperity in a community by first having a lifestyle that people want to engage in, that they want to be a part of. That lifestyle draws population. That population becomes a workforce, and businesses who want to grow, businesses who want to prosper, seek out that workforce and they collect their jobs where those people are. So one of the reasons that Nashville has recovered or is recovering from the recession more quickly than so many other communities, and I could cite so many places that were number 1 on this list, number 5 on this list, is because Nashville has a lifestyle that is drawing people to this area, and those people that are being drawn to this area are providing a workforce for jobs that create the prosperity in this area. Just a couple of pieces of math. Our cost of living in this area is 88% of the national average. That's a 12% advantage over the rest of the country. Our per capita income is 115% of the national average. That means, on average, compared to anywhere else in the country, we have a disposable income of 27%. Now that 27% in people's pockets is what helps them buy homes, it's what helps them start businesses, it's what helps them get an education, it's what fuels our charitable economy, our nonprofit economy. That simple piece of math from a prosperity perspective absolutely fuels the kind of vitality that you see in this community right now. But go all the way back to the beginning of the process. Go all the way back to the lifestyle. The group of people that we see in migrating to Nashville are coming here because it's a friendly city and they have an expectation of finding a multicultural experience that they regard as valuable. I'll come back to that a little bit more later. There are some statistics and some facts, though, I'd like to tell you, and I'd also like to mention to you that, this feature is a part of Nashville's DNA. And by the way, by no means am I saying to you that this is a perfect environment with regards to diversity. There will always be challenges when it comes to diversity. Diversity and having a diverse community is kind of an ongoing and a moving target. But there are some aspects of this community that cause us to be a more hospitable environment for diversity than other places. Number one, we are a friendly city, but if you go back into our history, you will see that around the Civil War, after the Union created the federal government created a distribution center here in Nashville, and this is some of the very earliest economic history. The federal government created this area as a distribution center for its Western theater, or the Civil War in the South. After the war was over, fundamentally the federal government abandoned that capital investment that they had made here. It coincided with the creation of railroads along the coast in North Carolina, and that were being fundamentally built by Irish immigrants. Irish immigrants began to come across North Carolina, Tennessee to arrive in Nashville and take up that distribution business that distributed things throughout the Southeast. As others began to arrive, they would reach out. By the way, you see this happening even today. They would reach out to their friends, to their brothers, and they would help them get their businesses started and create prosperity for themselves. Then at the turn of the century, there was a wave of Jewish immigration to the United States, which created a whole new industry, particularly a merchant industry in Nashville, then a financial industry. These hallmarks of entrepreneurship and the community helping people to establish successful businesses are part of the DNA that has caused us to be attractive as a multicultural place. Additionally, in the 70s, Nashville became a refugee center. So you saw Vietnamese refugees come into this area, aided by the churches. Over time, additional populations have arrived here to again continue to build this blend. You've probably heard Jesse Register talk about the fact that there are over 100 different languages spoken in the Nashville public school system. Part of the reason, because this is a welcoming place, but also because the economics are good for entrepreneurship, this becomes an attractive place for people who want to be prosperous and are willing to make the effort to be prosperous. Here are some statistics on Nashville at the moment. 77% white, 15% black African American, 2.3% Asian, 4.7% of two or more races. But listen to some of these nationalities and ethnicities. The first Kurdish refugees arrived here in 1976, and there were 3 successive waves of that immigration. And you already know that we have the largest Kurdish population outside of the Middle East anywhere in the United States. The Somalis, over 5,000 Somali refugees call Nashville home, and Nashville's a resettlement city. The Bhutanese are Nashville's newest refugee community. When the Department of State announced that it was going to resettle 60,000 Bhutanese over the next several years in the United States, Nashville became a focal point for that resettlement. And recently, the Egyptian Consul General from Houston was in Nashville, and when I asked him why he was here, he said, because the largest population of Egyptians outside of Egypt in his southern territory reside in Nashville, Tennessee. So Nashville is diverse in many, many ways and is emerging as a global city. That multicultural environment is part of what makes us attractive to both foreign investors that want to be a part of this economy and workforce that wants to benefit from the prosperity that exists in this community. Just a couple of more statistics before hopefully we move to the panel's comments. The diversity has been proven to foster a more creative and innovative workforce. 85% of global enterprises that want to locate in a specific place say they want to be in a diverse location because diversity is crucial to fostering the innovation in their companies. People of color own 22% of U.S. businesses. That number is actually higher in Nashville. Women own 28%. And the financial website NerdWallet, one of my favorite names for a website. NerdWallet ranked Nashville on its top 20 list of cities for women to start a business. So we've seen over the last 2 decades a 60% growth in population, and a large portion of that population growth has not only been grown by in-migration, but also immigration. So a couple of concluding remarks as I go forward from a prosperity perspective. Keep in mind that when you look at population growth over the next 20 or so years in Nashville, Tennessee, and really in this country, you see a boomer generation, a large group of a boomer generation that is moving off the scene. They are leaving the workforce and the economy as a participant in the workforce. They are being followed by a generation that is smaller. There are not enough people moving into the workforce to replace that boomer generation. Because of that, communities that succeed are going to rely on in-migration of people who have the education, want to make the effort, and want to be a part of the prosperity formula. Cities like Nashville that already possess some element of openness, friendliness, and a welcoming attitude toward immigrants will be the beneficiaries of those productive people wanting to come and be a part of the economy. So going into the future, the marketplace is dictating that communities need to be culturally diverse. The 18 to 35, the younger growing generation is much more comfortable with that multiculturalism and seeks it as a part of their lifestyle. And then for people like me who are 62 years old and sometime in the future hope to retire, I'm going to be depending on that population and this economy to drive the value of this community up, the prosperity up, so that as a retiree, I continue to benefit from the growth and the prosperity that exists in this area. So, happy to answer any questions as a part of the panel. I think the next move, Erwin, is for you to talk with the panelists. But I do want to stress to you, I've been accused of being relentlessly positive. And I considered that a compliment. I don't think it was intended that way, but I think it was a compliment. And one of the things that makes me most optimistic about Nashville is the fact that Nashville is a welcoming place, and the proof of the pudding's in the tasting. Look around this community, you see the diversity evident. So thank you for asking me to be here, Erwin, and the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Before I invite our panelists to respond to Ralph's comments, if you have any questions, please write them on the card that's on your table or your chair. Raise your hand, and one of our organizing committee members will pick it up. So now, let me introduce our first panelist, Farshid Firdousi, and I'm going to ask each of you to try to limit your remarks to somewhere between 5 and 7.5 minutes.
I go first.
You go first. And, no.
She wants to.
She wants to go.
Well, I will go first.
We yield to that.
My name is Hannah Paramore, and I'm really glad to be here, and I'm glad to go first after Ralph. And I want to say I'm really impressed by the number of people who showed up for this. I didn't have much of an idea of what to expect tonight. I own a small business in downtown Nashville. We're a digital agency, which means that we design websites and create digital media campaigns to market these businesses. I think that we have a problem with racial and cultural diversity in our industry. And I think that it goes back to just the fact that your work life is not going to be that much different from your church life, your neighborhood, your home life, your education base. And if it's going to be different, we have to be intentional about that. And so I appreciate what you said, Ralph, about how the people who are helping to move our city forward recognize that it's all about creating neighborhoods where cultural diversity is not just accepted, it's expected, and it's what people seek out. Because it's the only way for us to change our view of what is acceptable and expected in our workplaces. My daddy was a preacher, and I grew up in West Nashville, just down the street. And so we were raised in a very strict, Protestant faith. And I just say that my view of faith and what was right was extremely narrow for most of my life until I began to travel. And until I began to see that the world is a very large place, and that maybe it's a thing that comes with age, or maybe it's just exposure. But I've really sought to broaden my own horizons, and through my children, I've raised 2 children, I have 3 grandchildren, to a level of making it disappear. Let's make that disappear. That. The lines between people, because it is true that as people, I think we struggle with like attracts like, right? And until we change our like, until we change what our own personal lives are about, it's not going to infiltrate our businesses the way that it should. If I was in a Protestant church, I would ask for an amen right there. If I could ask for an amen, this place right here. I actually drew pictures of neighborhoods and schools and churches while I was listening to Ralph, because I feel it so deeply inside me. I was raised in West Nashville here, and so that was I was born in 1959, so it was the late 60s, mid 70s when court-ordered busing started, and I was smack dab in the middle of that. It was one of the blessings of my life to go to Pearl High School and to be one of the minority. Very, very small minority of people who weren't allowed off the sidewalk after the end of school. We were literally walked to our bus and put on the school, and thank God our climate is different now. Because my children said to me not too long ago, Mom, I wasn't raised to think anything different about the color of somebody else's skin. I can't believe that was a part of your life. And still, I have a company of almost all white people, and I don't understand. I think that there is a disconnection between the organizations that can help small businesses to bridge this gap. And so it's somewhere between the university system, the community college system, the community systems that can help us to put programs in place where we can go, let's be intentional about this. Because the truth is that small business owners only have so much time in the day. We have a lot of responsibilities and a lot of things to think about. And diversity is not nearly as high on the list as I think it should. That is my confession to you right here at the cathedral. Thank you.
My name is Farshid Ferdowsi, and I did not prepare a particular presentation to give tonight. I just thought that, whatever I'm inspired to say, I will say. So I think the best way for me to just convey my thoughts about the subject is to just tell you a little bit about my own story, as what my background is, how I came to be where I am. I was born and raised in Iran. I was born in 1955 in Iran. I went to high school in Iran. I came to the United States at age 18 on August 23rd, 1973, and I remember that date. And I came here to go to college, basically. My father was an entrepreneur, and he sent all of his children to the West to get a higher education. I was the youngest, and I knew that I would come, and sure enough, I was here. And I attended Vanderbilt. I have a degree from Vanderbilt, and I went to UC Berkeley, did graduate studies in Berkeley, came back to Vanderbilt, taught at Vanderbilt for a while, towards a doctoral program that I never finished, and then 1979 comes about, and the Iranian Revolution hits. And many of you here who are a little bit older remember that we had a very friendly relationship with the United States that turned on its head overnight. So here I am, age of 24, and we had a terrible economy here in Nashville, and I was going around. I was a structural engineer, structural mechanics, structural engineer, computer science. Those were my training. I would go from door to door looking for a job, and everybody was telling me that we're not hiring anybody because we're not even building an outhouse, let alone any buildings or structures for you to be an engineer for. So what I did, I created my own job. I started writing programs. I wrote business programs. My brother here was my first client, and he wound up being my partner, and he basically started me in my business. So I spent the decade of the 80s, and I basically became an entrepreneur, software engineer, built a business. The business continued. In the 90s, I turned it into a payroll processing company. By the end of the 90s, I had the 6th largest payroll processor in the United States. Now, that is a story that is not possible anywhere else in this world but the United States. Nowhere else can this happen. And here I am, an immigrant. And most other places, if you're an immigrant, the minute that you walk into a place, you have something against you. You have barriers against you. I did not feel like I had any barriers. I had a great education. I had a welcoming group. I had a welcoming set of partners and friends and colleagues and customers. And nobody ever told me, you're Iranian, our countries are at a verbal war against each other, and therefore we're not going to do business with you. I never felt that. Nobody ever told me we're not going to do business with you because you're Iranian. And I believe that that's if we need any evidence, that's one of the greatest evidence to the greatness of this country and these people. So that's what I did, and I continue to be in that business. I sold my former business. I kind of retired for a few years. Now I'm back at it again, doing it a second time. So one of the things I want to share with you is that I belong to a religious minority called the Baha'i faith. In Iran, the Baha'i faith is considered a heretic religion, and it is severely persecuted. In fact, in 1982, my father, that I mentioned earlier, was an entrepreneur and somebody who had a vision to send his children to the West to get higher education, was executed for his faith. Because he was a Baha'i, he was killed. It's just difficult to say, or difficult to believe it, or difficult to understand it, but that does happen in the world today. Now, as horrible as that is, he was not the only one. There were hundreds like him who were members of the Baha'i faith who were executed in Iran. And to this day, the Baha'is are severely persecuted in Iran. They cannot attend universities, they cannot hold jobs, they cannot hold business licenses, etc., etc. Why do I say that? That's the extreme of what intolerance when it comes to faith or othering can result. Okay, that's the extreme. When we see the extreme and how ugly it is, we need to nip it in the bud at its earliest manifestation. So this group is called Children of Abraham, which I'm assuming it's relating to the Abrahamic faiths of the Jewish religion and the Christian religion and the Muslim religion. But there are all kinds of other religions. We got the Hindus and we got the Buddhists and we got the Baha'is and we got all kinds of other faiths, Catholics and Protestants. And the fact is that all of us find different paths to God, and these paths may be different, but the ultimate destiny is the same. We are all children of the same Father, regardless of our religion, regardless of our race, regardless of our color, regardless of our creed, regardless of our nationality. Everything that divides mankind is man-made. If we divide ourselves by color, we invented that. If we divide ourselves by nationality, we created that. If we divide ourselves by economic strata, it's in our imagination. If we divide ourselves by gender, we did that to ourselves. God didn't intend any of it. And we need to reflect on the fact that we are all like flowers in the same rose garden. It's good to have diversity. It's good to have different colors. It's good to have different shapes and sizes and backgrounds. And we need to celebrate our diversity. And I believe that that's the direction that mankind in general, and this country in particular, is moving towards. I'd like to close by reading one thing that I just read this afternoon. I told you about the persecution against the Baha'is in Iran. It's not just in Iran, it's in all Muslim countries where Baha'is are persecuted. They're singled out for persecution more than anywhere else in Iran. That is gradually shifting. We don't quite know why, but that's gradually shifting. I think people are beginning to understand their own folly. And I just read a paper today where it is quoting an Arab scholar in the island of Bahrain saying the following. Dr. Mansoud said, the need is to go beyond the idea of mere tolerance or even coexistence. I want to be in the process of co-discovery, to see what unites and what is diverse. I want to enjoy diversity as an exercise in spiritual inclusion and practice. And as Ms. Paramore said earlier, we need to be intentional about it. We need to seek discomfort. It is not just enough to talk about diversity. It's not just enough to talk about, hey, it's great for people of different backgrounds to be together. Let's go home and find out who did we have for dinner over last time. Is our dinner tables integrated? Forget about workforce. I'm talking dinner tables. If you've never had somebody of a different faith at your dinner table, do so. If you've never had somebody of a different race or nationality at your dinner table, find one, invite them, and learn about it. It is through discovery, co-discovery, understanding, seeking discomfort that we can break the barriers that divide us artificially.
Thank you. What time is dinner? My name is Daryl Freeman. I came to Nashville about 23 years ago as a graduate of MTSU. My father worked in the foundry for 38 years. My mom was a maid. I came to Nashville broke. Well, I had $2,000. And I took $2,000 and I started an IT company in the office the size of a closet with my wife's credit cards, and I'm still married to her today. That company that I started 22 years ago today employs about 380 people around the country and in Latin America and in Europe. And I say all that to say, look at me. What color am I? Nashville looked at me and determined they knew that I was an African American. But that did not stop me from getting in any door in Nashville. It didn't stop me from getting in any door in Nashville. I'm not saying that it was a perfect journey. Every now and again, Chuck, I get on the elevator to the City Club, and as I'm riding up to the 20th floor, It asked me if I was going upstairs to fix drinks. The answer to that question was no. Or I would be standing in a parking lot somewhere around and a person would bring his car around and hand me his keys. And back when I was a little bit younger with a lot more bravado, I would say, dude, I wouldn't even take your car. I'm the guy in the Mercedes. I wouldn't say that today. But the point I want to make is diversity in Nashville go hand in hand. If you work hard in this city, if you work hard, Farzine, you can make it to the highest echelons of this city. I was the Nashville Chamber of Commerce chairman because I worked hard at it. I finally made with a bunch of friends because I worked hard at it. If you work hard, you can make it. Now, in my information technology company, I have an executive team. And I believe that in order for you to have quality, you must have diversity. Because there's not one race or group of people that has a patent on quality. Look at a football team or a basketball team or a baseball team. You got diverse talents on all those teams at the highest levels. Imagine an all-white basketball team today. Would they win, Barry? Imagine that. The point I want to make is, if you're going to have quality, you got to have diversity. And what my message to Nashville is if we're going to be great, we must be inclusive. If we're going to be great, we must be inclusive. We can't afford to discriminate against any one race or group of people. If we're going to get there, we got to all get there together. Now, I understand that discrimination still does exist. Shame on us for that. Shame on us for that. But Nashville is a great place. It's a great place. I came here with nothing. And I was able to make something out of myself in spite of starting with nothing. So when Ralph asked me to be here, it's a great opportunity to talk about diversity. In my IT company, I got an executive team. How many of you, raise your hand if you've ever met an African-American woman that's the chief financial officer of a multi-million-dollar company? Raise your hand. One. I got one on my staff. Raise your hand if you've met an African-American woman who runs a business on 3 different continents. Raise your hand. One. I got one on my staff. Raise your hand if you met a white guy that runs sales all across the country. Raise your hand. If you met a white guy, I got one on my staff. Raise your hand if you met a white guy that's the CEO of a company. Raise your hand. That's everybody. I got one on my staff. The point is, I have a very diverse staff, and it's intentional. Because I know that each person brings something to the table that's different. It's going to look at a problem a different way. That we're not all thinking about the same problems the same way. You need to have diversity.
Amen.
You need to have diversity. And I'm going to say this. This is the first time I've ever been in a church where there's a whole bunch of blacks and whites together. Because normally Sunday's the most desegregated day in the week. So I'm glad to be here.
So we have a few questions. If anybody has any other questions, please raise your hand and we'll pick them up and get those to our panelists. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw the questions out. I think we got 4 engaging folks here, each of who can certainly speak their mind. So I'm just happy to jump in and try to respond. So all of you spoke about being intentional in terms of diversity. So the question is, do any of you have any ideas of how we go about diversifying our neighborhoods? As Mr. Freeman just said, Sunday is the most segregated day of the week. Needless to say, our neighborhoods aren't where they need to be. Any thoughts you had about that? And you can use the microphone there to pass it around. Absolutely.
It's the whole idea of intentional. I had a conversation with my son. My son is going to UT Austin to get his master's in architecture. And I asked him, where are you going to stay? He said, I'm going to move into a Latino community. He said he wants to move into a Latino community. Why? He's fluent in Spanish. He likes the Latin culture, and he wants to go work with the Latin youth. So he is actually going someplace where he doesn't belong. He probably would be the only Persian living in there. So you want a diverse neighborhood, move. Simple.
And I'm diversifying my neighborhood.
And I want to live in Daryl's neighborhood.
They won't let us in.
Well, I think people are going to live where they feel comfortable, right? Where they feel safe, where they have access to things that they want to do and like to do. And so I think it has a lot to do with the overall planning of our city to create spaces where people want to live. And a lot of that, a lot of the folks who are in Section 8 housing, a lot of that is near downtown Nashville. And so I'm really excited about what's happening in the urban core, which I think is extremely important to growing diverse neighborhoods. It just happens to be where we are as a country. Sorry?
You gotta grab the microphone.
So, I also believe that where you live has a lot to do with your economic status. Your economic status has a lot to do with your education, what your parents did, where you live, et cetera, et cetera. The point I want to make is, in Nashville, we have to do a better job of educating our kids so they can graduate with a skill set, either to go into the workforce or go on to college, because I don't care how many African Americans or Hispanics that I want to live in my neighborhood, if they can't afford it, my want doesn't matter. So we all must keep our eyes on the educational process in this city to make sure.
This is just my round one. Everybody else has Daryl made the first important comment that I want to make, which is education. The community has to provide a quality education, and it has to guarantee that its residents will get that. And we're behind on that. The second thing the community has to guarantee is that there's equal opportunity. You have to remove the barriers to opportunity. Opportunity exists for everyone. No one should have a restriction to pursuing opportunity. The third thing is that for people who make the effort, they should have the opportunity to be rewarded for that effort. Now let me come back to a simple market fact, which of course you'd expect a chamber guy like me to believe. The millennial generation, the generation that's rising now, partially because of economic factors, doesn't care about square footage or acreage as much as previous generations. It cares about proximity and amenities. One of the amenities that they look for is a multicultural environment. They treasure the creative aspect, the variety of that area. I absolutely believe that when the millennial generation gets to the point of having enough wealth or enough economic resource, people are going to be creating these communities that the people who have shown the effort, have the equal opportunity the education do, will be able to pursue. I do think the public policy needs to encourage the creation of those areas, those environments, where market-driven development can take place to create those opportunities. But it should be a little easier because it's not about square footage anymore. It's about proximity and amenities, and cultural is part of the amenity.
So let's turn to another theme that just came up in your discussion, which is exposure. Any thoughts?
Start with there.
How do we make our schools more diverse? You have to remove the barrier. When you open a charter school in one particular area of the city, you must be able to provide transportation for other kids in other areas of the city to make it there. Now, we know that 70% of our kids in Metro are on free and reduced lunch. The majority of those are people of color. If you want people of color in your charter school, 9 times out of 10, you got to provide some way for them to get to the school. And so so you got to remove the barrier from transportation to get kids there. Then secondly, you've got to be intentional in going door to door in those neighborhoods where you want to get kids from. If you have an all-white charter school, that's a problem. If you have an all-black charter school, that's a problem. We exist, we learn more from diversity than we learn from sameness. And so removing those barriers, particularly in Metro, removing the barriers of transportation and going to the doors and knocking on those doors of people of color to invite them into your school system.
What about our public schools?
I'm gonna pass that one around. I've been talking too much.
What was the question, Errol?
Well, the question is, how do we promote diversity in our schools? Darryl addressed the charter school issue. What about our public schools?
You know, again, this is an ideal to reach for, but if you have a high-quality education, then all people will be drawn to those schools. And when all people are drawn to those schools, you're going to get the mix, especially if you offer choice. But as Darryl said, and I'm really abbreviating this, as Darryl said, you have to remove the barriers for people to access that choice. You have to, that's part of our community responsibility. I don't know any other way to say it except that not only does the community have the responsibility, but the community has the benefit of removing those barriers and providing that.
I was just thinking about going to Pearl High School because I used to skip school. I used to skip gym in the middle of the day with Sylvia Lewis and go across the street to the projects and make grilled cheese sandwiches and watch the Young and the Restless. That's what I did. So, you know, I mean, children though, by their nature, I don't think children have this problem. I think children mirror their parents' beliefs, and like that your children look to you to tell them what is right and what is wrong and how you treat people. And so, I mean, would my parents have put me in private schools in the early 70s when court-ordered busing first started? If they could have afforded it, maybe so. Thank God they didn't, because I was like, let me at it. Just let me at it. Because children don't see those racial lines and certainly don't understand the differences in faiths that parents do. And I think it's our responsibility to introduce diversity. And, well, hey, Charles, how you doing, man? I think it's our responsibility as parents to take on that mantle, just like it is as business owners.
Yeah, just first of all, if you have diverse neighborhoods, you will have diverse schools. So, and one is connected to the other. But I want to share a quick story with you about being intentional. My wife, Aram, she came to the United States when she was 5 or 6 years old, and she and her sister were 1 year apart. This is before desegregation of schools, before the Brown versus Board of Education. So she and her sister are going to an all-white school. And they're coming home and they're spewing things to their parents that the parents are not comfortable with. Because they're picking up that poison in school. They're making some remarks at home that they don't like. The parents take their kids out of the school, that's my wife and her sister at age 6 and 7, and enroll them in an all-black school. They did that, and the Board of Education didn't allow it. They had to go get special permission. Their pictures were on the front page of the banner, which was a local newspaper. I have it, I'd be glad to send it to you if you want it. Here's these 2 kids, 2 white kids, or whiter, and they are in the middle of an all African American year and a half, I think for 2 years they were there just to eliminate the poison from their minds. So you have to be intentional if you want to see something happen.
The next question goes to, I think, something that Hannah mentioned during her talk. And the question is, as a student that attends a historically black university, I see few national employers reach out to our school. How do we bridge the gap between us and national companies?
Hold the mic closer.
Hold the mic closer, she says.
And stand up and walk around.
How do we bridge the gap between national employers and HBCUs? I have students from FIS on the staff, students from TSU on my staff, and we go there to recruit. I mean, it's not rocket science. If you want, look here, I'm gonna make this really simple. If you want black people on your staff, go over to TSU. There's some qualified people at TSU. If you want some black people on your staff, go to Fisk University. We got 2 jewels here in this city.
That's right.
There's no excuse for not having African Americans on your staff. That is utterly ridiculous. To say that you can't find it when TSU produces some awesome graduates, Fisk produces awesome graduates. There's no excuse. This is 2014. If your staff is lily white or all black, shame on you.
The only thing I would like to add to that is that jobs are not charitable items. Businesses are hiring people who can do the job for them. It is the obligation of the applicant to make the point that you can add value to that business's activity. The key is, I think, I would say, for organizations like the Chamber to connect with those education institutions, which we do, and promote those students who have the skills and the knowledge and the capability to fulfill the needs for the companies who are seeking that workforce. But there's still a requirement that the skills and the knowledge match what the business needs, and that there be some effort on the part of the applicant to say, I can fulfill that need. There are organizations out there, including the Chamber, though, that can accentuate that connection, that can accelerate that connection. And you should check our website if you'd like to do that, because we're anxious to put qualified individuals into businesses' workforce.
And I suggest to you, Ralph, that a student from TSU will articulate their ability to do the job just as a student from Vanderbilt would do. There's no difference. There's no difference.